The fall sports playoff marathon is upon us. Welcome to what will likely be the final game of the season here at Galvin Court. And that's because the White Bear Lake Area Bears, the number 3 seed in Section 4-4A, begin their postseason push against the St. Paul Central Minutemen, number 6 in Section 4-4A. We'll break down the matchup in more detail after the Star Spangled Banner. Now we'll get to the starters again. White Bear Lake, number 3 in Section 6, or Section 4-4A, that is, and St. Paul Central, number 6 in Section 4-4A. And the reason we say this will likely be the last home game for the Bears, if they win this game, they will move on to the semis and take on the winner of the 2-7 matchup. And typically in section competition, the first round usually weeds out the contenders from the rest of the field. You don't get a lot of upsets. And as the bracket
number 16,
plays out, there it is. Roseville, the number 2 seed. They should get past Irondale, you would think. Stillwater, the number 1 seed in Section 4-4A. Of course, in 4A, the big storyline that will likely envelop 4A volleyball as we make our way toward the state tournament in a few weeks at Grand Casino Arena. Can anyone beat Lakeville South or Chanhassen? Lakeville South and Lakeville North likely headed for a clash down in Section 1. Chanhassen, a rising star in Section 2. There's Mackenzie Leverty, the head coach for White Bear Lake. She's been around the block a few times. And so have we. We've been privileged to cover a few games. In fact, I was here a few weeks ago for White Bear Lake's victory over Mounds View, and I had a chance to see them at the Deke Pink Invite at Benilde St. Margaret's, the final weekend tournament of the regular season. There is Ann Brandstad, the head coach of St. Paul Central. Neither team has stats available, but St. Paul Central, they have a lot of young pieces who Ann told me could be players to watch in future years. That doesn't mean she thinks they're going to fold up and shrivel into a tiny little ball tonight, but they've had a tough time against higher level teams. They did finish first in a 3-way tie for the St. Paul City Conference. So Harding was able to play in the Twin Cities game because they had the longest absence. But what St. Paul Central has been able to do with some of their youngsters and some wily veterans like Julia Gabriel, who was surveying her college options, and told me before the game, keep an eye out on this team. Here's a look at the Suburban East and how they finished this year. There was no 3-way tie for first. Stillwater won outright. Eastridge lost a couple of games. Cretin-Durham Hall lost a pair, including one to this White Bear Lake team. Cretin-Durham Hall, though, they are going to be a force to watch in Class 3A. But Marshall, that has been their class, their domain. Alexandria pulled off the upset a year ago. But Stillwater will be a tough foe. They had a deep run a few years ago, and volleyball was still a 3A sport. And for White Bear Lake, as we had said before, I've had a chance to see them now in a few games. I was here last Monday shooting a feature on the station you are watching right now. This is a special presentation, if you're watching online, of SCC on NSPN.TV. NSPN gracious enough to allow SCC and other stations a temporary home for playoff coverage leading up to the state tournament. And there's the three-way tie we were talking about. Central, Harding, and Highland Park all finished at 5-1. St. Paul Central and White Bear Lake met in the regular season. The Bears won in straight sets. Not a runaway per se in any three of those sets, but White Bear Lake was able to pick up a few more points. I have noticed that Martina Caligari, who is coming over from Italy, and that is the young woman who will be featured on NSPN soon, if you happen to be watching this on NSPN.TV. If opponents can contain her imprint, her influence on the attack, it usually works out in their favor. In the games where White Bear Lake has struggled, Martina wasn't able to get going. As you saw in the game with Mounds View a few weeks ago on SCC, she was able to fire away and pick up a few kills. And there is the aforementioned Martina Caligari, who will start things off with a line shot for the Bears. If you're curious, I did ask her what she thinks of American versions of Italian food. She says it's quite different, but the American variant's not quite up to specs. She said that playfully, of course. Had to ask because how prevalent Italian food is here. And Martina, prevalent on the offensive side for White Bear Lake. A couple of kills, one line shot, one off-speed tap. And the Bears off to an early 2-0 start. But today is the first day for volleyball and every football class outside of 6A. State soccer tournament also beginning this week. That will go down as a point for the Minutemen on the hitting error by Layla Otto. Banged it into the net. State soccer quarterfinals taking place just across the parking lot tonight and tomorrow. White Bear Lake going off speed again, and Otto makes up for her earlier miscue. Set went into the ceiling, and the Bears pick up a point. We've talked about this at Galvin Court and at a lot of gyms through the section final. The lower clearances can cause havoc. When you get to state, obviously different story. Somebody touched the net. St. Paul Central will pick up the point. Back to serve for the Minutemen. Julia Gabriel will get you names and numbers as we make our way through. Serve received by Caligari went into the ceiling. Of course, we had the starters on screen for you. Caligari again. Got the deflection, and that is her third kill of the first set. Like we said, if Martina can get going, White Bear Lake has fared well. Mackenzie said she's not the tallest or the biggest physically, but she is one of the smartest in terms of ball placement. It's an attribute affirmed by her teammates, who will now affirm an ace for Layla Otto. Last Monday, White Bear Lake hosted senior night, losing to Forest Lake in straight sets. It was a close game, just didn't have that extra gear that the Rangers did. Cross-court pass. White Bear Lake picks it up. Otto to Caligari. Cross-court. She's not the quickest in terms of velocity or power, and some of that might have to do with her being a little undersized as an outside hitter, but that is the only role she has played distance. She picked up the sport at the age of 8. Otto serving. This looks long, but Central will play it. Gabriel on the serve receive. Could be a break for the Bears. Caligari with the up. That is Addison Lee. St. Paul Central responds. Eastke's out there. Libero. Reagan Farmer making the play, and St. Paul Central finds the gap. That's Olivia Smale with the first kill for the Minutemen. 7-3 is the score. Smale with the off-speed serve. Now Farmer. And hit the ground. Farmer put it just in front of her target. Reagan looking at some college options. There aren't any big college commitments on the White Bear Lake or St. Paul Central side, as that serve from Caligari just brushed the net. St. Paul Central able to get one on the cross-court shot by Diana Talcott. Paul Central, the oldest high school in St. Paul. Built and opened in the 1800s. A lot of notable names have come through there in sports and elsewhere. Low line drive on the serve. Farmer went cross court and no one there as the bump by Gabriel fell in front of the right post. From St. Paul Central's point of view anyway. So Farmer makes this 9-4. And White Bear Lake won the regular season meeting. They have controlled this series since the two teams resumed their section rivalry. Timeout St. Paul Central following the hitting error by Iris Audette. Winner will play in the semifinals. In volleyball, just about every section goes high seed, so Stillwater will host all the way through. As we take a look at the last play. That's Chris getting you the behind the back view, the back row view, so to speak. 10-4, White Bear Lake. Their student section here in a whiteout. Again, White Bear Lake, in all likelihood, will play Roseville on Thursday. And next week, actually a week from tomorrow, will be the section final in 4-4A. Of course, we also have another team we're keeping an eye on in volleyball competition. That would be Matamidi, who is primed to make another deep run in section 4-3A. We'll keep you posted. Back to action. That time, White Bear Lake can't get under it. Point will go to St. Paul Central. I do want to clarify, coming out of this timeout, if you're watching online, we'd like to welcome those of you on NSPN.TV, but if you're watching this on cable, you can find us on SEC, and that's because NSPN doesn't have a TV channel, at least not yet. That is a let kill. Pearl Niamioya. From here, it looks like Pearl took an inadvertent hit during a practice session, but looking quite spry on that play. That's Abby Meyer, one of the setters. Central just a half step late. Joelle Akueli did maybe a half second on that one. White Bear Lake up 12-5 as they are running away with set one. Meyer off speed. Akueli got under it just in time. Meyer with the up. Giski to Niamioya. Pearl, she's another player who can navigate White Bear Lake to smooth terrain if she is successful on attacks. Back kills for number 16. High serve receive, and St. Paul Central touched the net. Sophie Sataskar lost track of spacing for a moment. And the Bears elongating their advantage, 14-5. Solid serve by Myers. St. Paul Central able to catch up to it though, and they'll score on the cut by Iris Audette, her first kill. As it stands right now, St. Paul Central with some mishaps, some struggles getting their attack in formation. Meyer goes to Niemioya again. Nobody touched it. No hitting error on Pearl. A couple of points here for the Bears. Free ball coming for the Minutemen. There is a story in how to address women's teams for St. Paul Central, as the attack by Niemioya did not cross. It bumped into the net and down, so that will be a hitting error. St. Paul Central, they've scored 3 in a row. In write-ups in the newspaper and online, they're sometimes referred to as the Minute Maids, although that term itself a little antiquated. So some use the Minutemen, even though it is not anatomically correct, if you know what I mean. But that kill by Diana Talcott was certainly correct. 4 straight for St. Paul Central. 14-9. That will go down as a point for Maya Link, and you heard her tap rush the net. We have that microphone. It brushed the net, but if it goes over, it's down for a point. Running tap, White Bear Lake picks it up. Pearson with the save. And Link with the finish. White Bear Lake going left. I should say Central going left. White Bear Lake getting under it. That was Gieske. Free ball for the Minutemen. They'll try again, cross court. The pancake by Gieske. Otto rejected. The White Bear Lake keeps it in play. Tough break for the Bears. St. Paul Central cashes in. Iris Audette with the finish. It was a good heads-up effort by White Bear Lake, as you saw in the replay, and Audette, that looked low as soon as she released it, and it was. But sometimes things get a little rocky. That was one of those deals. Whoa! Martina Caligari jumped the line. That was a tough cut. That was tapped over by Joelle Hakueli, I should say. We'll go back to serve. The fortuitous break for Joelle. Gets the dig. Caligari. Big up, and it bashes into the antenna. Caligari, unofficially, her 5th kill now of the first set. Abdul Moreno Rodriguez couldn't corral it softly enough. Otto serves that out of play. 18-12. Story of the game so far, White Bear Lake, a more prominent attack. Outpacing St. Paul Central significantly in kills. Caligari sent away. Ira Gibson Downey was involved. We'll get a closer look here. Actually, from that angle, it looked like Diana Talcott was the one to make contact. It's always tough to read the blocks from my vantage point. Armour gets the deflection in her favor, so that's another point for White Bear Lake. Historically, White Bear Lake and St. Paul Central, two teams who are grouped in the same section, just about every sport. Line shot. Hammering it down is Talcott. That's her third kill. She and Gabriel, two of the standouts this year for the Minutemen. Talcott, the sophomore. Yamioya running charge. Gets that one through. Although Ann Brandstad told me the St. Paul Central team does have a lot of young faces, there are a good number of seniors on the squad. Yamioya, hard swing. He was ready to tap it down if necessary, but the bump ends up falling toward the net. And it's a point for the Bears. We will follow that up with an ace. For Madison Lee, St. Paul Central will take their second and final timeout of the set, but White Bear Lake in good form, 22-14. Too many stumbles. And a lot of it has to do with the attacking game. Caligari, 5 kills already, unofficially. Yamioya with 4. And St. Paul Central as a team, unofficially, just 6. We look at the huddles. These two met a year ago in the same round. White Bear Lake won that one, but they needed 4 sets to do it. The two teams didn't play each other for a couple of years. When White Bear Lake and St. Paul Central got grouped into 4A, they resumed their non-conference series. Sections, of course, are based on geography. High serve receive and another ace for Addison Lee. White Bear Lake not ready to hibernate. I'm sure they've heard that more than once. That looks long, and it is. White Bear Lake has a sizable cushion. I don't think they'll have to sweat too much the first set unless St. Paul Central goes on a mammoth run. And that stings. You got the high serve receive, the overpass, as they call it in volleyball, a perfect opportunity to strike, and instead Iris Audet taps it into the net. Those are the plays, even though White Bear Lake had a big lead, those are the plays you want to cash in that could determine how far your season goes. Because in the section round, it's single elimination. When you move on, lose, your season's done. And this first set is done. On the swing from Layla Otto, White Bear Lake wins set one, running away 25-15 as they look to book a date into Thursday's semifinals.
I never realized that I'd be taking care of a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old on my own. Sometimes as dads, I think we're too hard on ourselves. We get down on ourselves on not being able to, we're the providers, but we also have to learn to take care of ourselves. Self-love made me a better dad because I realized my worth. My daughter Isabella recently had a graduation into high school, and I got emotional because I saw pride in her eyes. I saw my daughter have her own self-love, and I saw the hard work of me being that dad 24/7 transferred to my teenage daughter. The word father means a lot to me. When I give my love to my children as a father, I can see it.
Calling all big thinkers. The world's climate is changing. These aren't new facts, but it means we must think in new ways. Engineers are answering the call to create solutions that decrease our dependence on fossil fuels, taking lessons from the best engineer out there, nature. Engineers are creating cleaner, safer, and reliable energy.
It's a special edition of SCC on NSPN.TV if you're watching this live, and we're glad to have you with us. White Bear Lake certainly glad about that first set. I'm still Mike Beaton, and I'll tell you that a big difference that allowed White Bear Lake to take set one running away came down to hitting. 16 kills unofficially for White Bear Lake, 6 for St. Paul Central. And Martina Caligari got the Bears off on that quick start. First couple of points, she had 5 kills overall in set one. We look at several of them. St. Paul Central had some brief runs, but they just could not develop the consistency. They also had issues with location. Pearl Niamioya, 4 kills unofficially in the first set, as you saw, getting help from the net in one of those cases. Pearl, I would say, the most consistent attacker from the games I've seen out of White Bear Lake, but Martina is the wild card. Martina, of course, a foreign exchange student from Italy. After the semester, she will rejoin her club team as we look at some more first set highlights. There's one of 2 aces from Addison Lee that helped White Bear Lake secure set number 1. We're waiting to make sure all the substitutions are correct. So a brief pause. Again, the winner of this game will play Thursday in the section semifinal. It will likely be Roseville and White Bear Lake. NSPN.TV will have live coverage of that game in one way, shape, or form. But we're glad to take up temporary residence, and Pearl Niamioya taking up space again. think that was one of the St. Paul Central coaches who was telling Akueli that was a playable ball. Paul Central does play that one. Olivia Smale gets the deflection to fall for a point. Behind the back pass from Sophie Sadaskar, who is the setter for St. Paul Central. Again, neither team has their stats on any accessible site. Most teams do keep track through Huddle, but not all of them transfer those numbers to Strip Varsity and the related sites. That will be a hitting error on Layla Otto. Lake had just 3 in the first set. St. Paul Central also had just 3. Meyer to Caligari. St. Paul Central tried to save it. They did one better. That was a fist bump point for Sophie Sadaskar. I think that is the best way I can describe it. Blink got under it with the dig, but she went backwards and no one was there. Caligari blocked and gets the point anyway. Just like hockey and soccer, sometimes the ball takes an awkward bounce. First error on Gieske on the serve. Paul Central, though, has the early 4-2 lead. Meyer to Caligari. Minutemen able to play that one. Meyer this time to Lee. She comes down hard. Paul Central starting to make better reads with that ceiling. Ooh, White Bear Lake. The dig sailed backward. 3 ball for the Minutemen. Pearson with the diving up. Sadaskar goes right. And Iris Audette puts it right in no woman's land. Start for the Minutemen. Sadaskar still serving. Deflected a couple of times and out of play. Layla Otto closed out the first set with a kill, picks up her first one of this set. St. Paul Central across the center line. You know, the center line, up or down, cannot be crossed in any way, shape, or form. Otto to Caligari. Paul Central doing a better job so far picking up on her attacks. Lee pounds it into the net. Still early in the second set, but this is what the Minutemen are looking for. Get a more consistent attack going. That ace took a Karen back. The serve receive really went out of play. But as it got caught up in the rafters, it ricocheted inside, and that works out for White Bear Lake as Hakueli went too hard on her swing. Probably won't be able to see it from any vantage point. We don't have a ceiling cam. But White Bear Lake got a fortuitous bounce that leads to a point. The serve receive went right into Nia Mioya's hand, and she taps it down quite authoritatively. 6-all. This one will be a little easier to see. You can't get an ace. You want to serve it in a way to get those high serve receives, the high bounce back recoil. Gives your opponent a free look. Niemioya got underneath her own block. And Farmer with the deflection that lands for a point. Reagan was one of a couple of players I spoke to about the woman who's serving, Martina Caligari, and what she has meant to this team. Well, Martina means an ace right now as she got that one to Karam awkwardly off of Akueli. Caligari goes off speed. St. Paul Central able to play it this time. Gaudette scores. But Farmer had said for her and the other seniors on this team, made it a mission to be more inclusive, more welcoming. They felt at times maybe they didn't get that reception when they entered the program and decided to embody the phrase, be who you needed. And Martina has felt at home. She's a little sad, actually, that this will be her only year here in the States, at least for the time being. St. Paul Central staying with White Bear Lake. Akueli scores on the wine shot. Okueli with her first kill. Marino Rodriguez on serve. Niemioya in the windup. Just taps it over. Caligari back row attack. St. Paul Central with one of their own. And Diana Talcott gives St. Paul Central the lead once more. Farmer able to get it across as long as you're within the antenna. St. Paul Central just looked a little disorganized there. The road to state in this section runs through Stillwater. Section final will take place a week from tomorrow. On the other end, White Bear Lake gets a little disheveled. Link had a tough set. Niemioya wasn't expecting to backpedal, and she ended up colliding with Caligari, but no harm, no foul. A service error by Iris Audette gives control back to the Bears. Remain even at 10 apiece. Paul Central had the quick start. They were up 5-2. Had a lot of high serve receives. Niemioya gets into a windup. Okueli. Okueli with her second kill of the set. Did not score in the first. Or that was what I thought, but instead it went out of bounds. I stand corrected. There's Okueli. Niemioya. Starting to get in rhythm now. Another point for the Bears. Back-to-back errors on the Minutemen. Everty pacing along the sideline. She customarily does. Service error on Meyer and creating errors right now. Still neck and neck. to Link. That will fall out of play. One reason this set has been tight, unofficially, as I'm tallying the numbers, White Bear Lake and St. Paul Central even in kills, both with 6. It was a different story in the first set where White Bear Lake rocketed away. Maddie Pearson giving the Bears some separation on that ace. That has been a strength for the Bears. Unofficially, their 5th ace. St. Paul Central has yet to record one in this game. Sadaskar to Talcott. Got the deflection. St. Paul Central, if you're not familiar, located along 94 in Lexington. Many years ago, they shared their football and soccer stadium with Concordia University just down the block. Caligari. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. It's been a while since Caligari tallied a kill, but found a seam to drive through. Location, 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 always key in volleyball. Both teams still have their timeouts. Big up by White Bear Lake, allowing this rally to continue. They go left, they go right. And it's Otto who comes up with the point. 16-12, White Bear Lake slowly gaining ground. Their final home game in all likelihood. The setter dump did not go as planned for Sophie Sadaskar. That will lead to a timeout for the Minutemen. 17-12, White Bear Lake. After a neck-and-neck start, separating themselves. (16-11) was their final mark. Stillwater's 17-11, interestingly. Roseville had the best record, but they were the 2 seed, and a lot of that comes down to who you played, who you beat, and Stillwater winning the conference, that gave them a little leverage as well. As we take a look at some fans. If you're wondering what's in those bags, it's just popcorn. I've covered a lot of games here, and they always have bags of popcorn ready to go. Ref 1 enjoying himself. I know that's not his name, but that is the official designation. White Bear Lake lost their last 3 games of the regular season. They split their games at the Dave Pink invite, but when they ran into the first place pool, which included New Life Academy and Benilde St. Margaret's, as we will have a hitting error. St. Paul Central was calling for a deflection. They don't get one. We'll go against Myra Gibson Downey. Errors starting to pile up on the Minutemen, but they get one back on the net ball. I think that was Gibson Downey who won it. Let's take another look. It was. Sadaskar with her first service error and the second in this set, 19-13. The longest winning streak for White Bear Lake was 5 games, which included a victory over Cretin-Durham Hall in regular season play. Cretin-Durham Hall would get one back at the Twin Cities Challenge. Gibson Downey Scores another one from the middle. Block and a kill. Another player who didn't have much of a role in the first set in terms of offensive production. Paul Central, they can tamp down on the errors. That would be a big help if they try to make the upset bid. White Bear Lake trying to slip one past. Now St. Paul Central comes charging in, and Hokueli delivers a strike. St. Paul Central didn't face any teams that were ranked in the final ball of the regular season. Service error on Talcott. A whole bunch of errors on the Minutemen. 6 hitting errors unofficially, 3 service errors. 2015. That's in. Caligari paints the corner for her second ace. Timeout, St. Paul Central. White Bear Lake asserting their might again, at least in this matchup. The Minutemen did not have a win streak of more than 3 games this year. And again, they didn't play anybody who finished in the top 10 of any class, but against some of the higher level teams and even some of the Suburban East teams like Irondale, they had a tough time. But as Ann Branstad noted, we're looking at the White Bear Lake huddle right now. There are a lot of younger faces, players that are getting some time right now as sophomores, and I imagine more to come. White Bear Lake did get to play in the JV game. There's a look at the St. Paul Central bench. They are optimistic about what the future holds for this program. Last year they had a Division I prospect graduate. She's now playing volleyball at Sacramento State, and Caligari really trips up St. Paul Central again on the serve. And tapping it over everyone was Madison Lee. White Bear Lake took them a little while to build a run and assert themselves, but they are streaming with the flow. Certainly with the current, not against it. As they look to tie themselves into a set 2 victory, and Nia Mioya off the block, her second kill of this set. Feeling quite good about that. Caligari has delivered some fine serves over the last few points. Farmer got a deflection. No, it hit the net. Or St. Paul Central touched the net. So 9 set points, and Caligari will be charged with her first service error. Otto to Nia Mioya. That was brushed gently by Central. And they will pick up the point as White Bear Lake cross that center line. No need to fret yet if you're White Bear Lake, but the longer it takes to close out a set, the more antsy you may get. Free ball coming for the Bears. Ooh. Again. Otto jumped over and my reaction was to Gieski's dig. It put Otto in a tough spot where she had to lean against the net. That serve nearly went off her face. But St. Paul Central can't do much with the free ball. Otto to Lee. Tadaskar to Hokueli. And the Minutemen with 4 straight points. Like I said, if you can't close a set right away, it can increase the nerves, the tension, the anxiety. You know you're 1 point away. You don't want to give the other team momentum. That touched the antenna. 5 straight for the Minutemen. And Mackenzie Leverty is going to call a timeout. Try to ground her troops. Or as the saying it goes sometimes, get out and touch grass before they buckle under the potential stress. Tough to see on the replay with the camera moving, and that's just because life comes at you fast when you only record at 30 frames per second or possibly 60. But it did touch the antenna. It is 60. One day we'll have 120 frames per second like they do on GoPros. 24-20. But Leverty calling a timeout to get White Bear Lake in the right frame of mind, and I'll show myself out. Having way too much fun here during the stoppage. The 5 straight for the Minutemen has delayed this second set celebration, and trouble on the hit gives St. Paul Central another free ball. A short-range shot by Iris Audette goes down. That is 6 straight for the Minutemen, and now they're within range as Marina Rodriguez serves. A rotation violation. And a free point for the Minutemen. What is going on? It was 24-15. And now a comeback doesn't seem so far-fetched. It's rare, but I have covered games where teams overcame big deficits of 7, 8, 9, or even more. Hard, but not impossible. Ian Bioya. Finally. It could have been really dicey if she couldn't put that one through. But after an extended delay that left everyone holding their breath, White Bear Lake does take the second set, 25-22. They'll try to make it a straight set sweep when we return.
Sit up, team. When I look around this room, I see a fighting team of brave antibodies. But the flu is coming in strong, so I won't sugarcoat it. I need each one of you on your A game. The good news is, Anthony, the human body we've been tasked to protect, just got his flu shot, which supplied us with brand new gear to defend against the flu. That's right, we've upgraded our game with this new equipment. They give you a little extra boost. So let's go fight for Anthony, for his mom, his co-workers, that nice lady Patricia that lives down the street with the cute dog. In the face of viral adversity, we make Anthony thrive so he can protect himself and the people he loves most. Are you with me? Yeah!
Let's work as a team to defend against the flu. Gear up with a flu shot to help protect others and reduce your risk of being sick or hospitalized with the flu. Learn more at getmyflushot.org.
You look back at that second set, and had it not been for a litany of errors on St. Paul Central, they might have been able to take that second set in a surprise bid. They scored 7 in a row with White Bear Lake on set point. There I am. Happy to be with you on this Tuesday evening indoors as just about everyone gets the fall playoff sports in full swing. Volleyball and football beginning their runs, and soccer in the state tournament. Here's a look at some of the second set highlights. White Bear Lake pulled away after both teams had a close start. A lot of that had to do with some miscues, some disorganized play by St. Paul Central. But that 7-0 run, we'll have to keep that in mind because the game isn't over, obviously. You have to win 3 sets in a standard game. So can White Bear Lake fend off a St. Paul Central squad that had some resurgence? As we look at some more second set highlights, you have to give props to resiliency to teams that just won't fold up. And then that 7-0 run included a couple of miscues. A rotation violation among them, just not the kind of things you want to see. But that is something you definitely want to see, and that has been a huge help for White Bear Lake. The service game, 6 aces unofficially for the Bears, 0 for the Minutemen. Those points do make a difference. Tadaskar will try again with Talcott. Pearson on the day, Caligari off speed. A dig that turns into a point. We've seen a couple of those play out for both sides. Early in the third set. Again, if you're watching this online on NSPN.TV, we'll continue live coverage of state soccer quarterfinals tomorrow. Caligari through Hokueli for her first kill of the third set. Had just one in the second set, but a couple of aces. Got it over the block. Favorable spot. Center dump by Sadaskar. And a redemption of sorts after she tried one in the second set that ended up in the net. White Bear Lake won the regular season meeting in straight sets. They have not lost to St. Paul Central this decade since the two became section foes in 22. And Caligari rediscovering her form on the cross-court kill. Caligari has not changed her role ever since she suited up. Picked up the sport at 8 years old after watching her big sister, and got the idea of trying out the foreign exchange student program by watching online videos. As Diana Talcott scores on a cross-court shot. She's got a couple kills now in this third set. To finish up on Caligari, she watched online videos, probably on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and that was enough to pique her interest. Farmer get through that St. Paul Central block. She'll try again for the third time, and they remain a pestering force. So they go to Caligari, and the Italian standout says, I got this. 3 kills for Caligari. White Bear Lake hoping to say hip hip hooray with the section quarterfinal win. Setting error on Sadaskar. (5-3). Okueli If you don't know who number 20 is, I'll explain in a moment. She's sitting right now. That's Zoe Niemioja. And that is Pearl Niemioja. I presume the two are related. I say presume because I did not ask. And there is the off chance, although I would say highly slim in this case, that you can have the same surname and not be related. But I'm guessing they are. Niemioja is a little less common in the phone book. 6-3 the score. Make it 7-3. St. Paul Central went over the line. And White Bear Lake answering mightily so far to start this third set after St. Paul Central made it interesting at the end of the second. Zoe to Pearl, off the block and down. Timeout, St. Paul Central, 8-3 the score. White Bear Lake 5 kills already in set number 3, with 3 coming from Caligari and 2 from Pearl Niemioja. Ari Jaxie getting into it a little bit. Hasn't seen a whole lot of time in this game, but has played up front in past games. Everyone is strutting along. You can't see it right now because we're looking at the St. Paul Central huddle. They have a more pensive view of things, but Maya Link and Layla Otto, there we go. Oh, now they stopped right when the camera cuts to them. Of course. Or maybe they heard me. 8-3 the score. Again, if you're watching this on NSPN.TV, we will have more coverage of state soccer quarterfinals tomorrow and Thursday. And if you're watching this on SCC, we'll keep you informed about upcoming fall sports playoff games. There's a whole lot of procedural hurdles that I don't have time to get into as to what games we can cover and when. But we'll do our best to keep you informed right here on SCC or online. 8-3 the score. Farmer. And a scar with the up, but Okueli puts it in the net. We said you take away some of those errors by St. Paul Central, maybe they get the second set. That spirited run came up just a little too late. White Bear Lake up 9-3. You do wonder, is that the turning point as Caligari is having herself a game, unofficially her third ace. Nine kills, 3 aces. Something Caligari told me in my interview with her last week that is unique about this experience, the atmosphere. In a lot of European countries, they don't have after-school activities, at least not to the same degree that we do in the States. Lee slices one through, and White Bear Lake, they're not fooling around. I think they took what happened in the second set and understood if we're not careful, we could let one of these low seeds sprout up and bite us when we least expect it. Service error on Caligari. Just her second, though, and has been more productive than not in the service position. 11-4. Niemioja, ooh. Oh, was just a little low there. Marina Rodriguez got that one to brush by Pearl Niemioja. Free ball for the Minutemen. Sadaskar goes left, off speed. Zoe on the dig. Pearl tries again. Overpass. Pearl again rebuffed, that time by Talcott. But a hitting error on Julia Gabriel will hand White Bear Lake the point. Lee. Serve, Gabriel. Has at least one college option at the D3 level, but still surveying for potential paths. And Pearl Niemioya in the groove. 13-5. (14-5). Lee with her third ace. She sneaks it past Mia Dillard. Now it's Lee's turn to make some magic on serve. Timeout, White Bear Lake, their final of the third set. Timeout St. Paul Central, that is. Everything is clicking for White Bear Lake. That's about all I can say. But to finish up on that point, again, we'll have the feature story on Caligari air on NSPN.TV a little later. Let's take a look at the bracket once more, because White Bear Lake, if they advance, and it looks like they will, they'll take on, in all likelihood, Roseville. Now, if White Bear Lake advances and Irondale beats Roseville, then White Bear Lake would host, because, again, high seed hosts each round. But the road to state here runs through Stillwater, the #1 seed. While they haven't recaptured the form they once held a few years ago when they had Miss Volleyball Maddie Whittington in their ranks, been formidable. And there has been a good deal of parity. There's a block for St. Paul Central, and at this point, they'll take almost anything to uplift their spirits. Smale and Dillard involved on the block, and thought Dillard was going to take Smale with her. I don't think Amia wants to let her go. Farmer, got it. Jill sub out, Meyer will come in. White Bear Lake will also do the same. They run a 5-1 formation, but as you have seen in this game at least, and Zoe, as I understand, came up midway through the year. Some teams have two setters, but they'll trade depending on where they're at in the rotation, and others will have two setters on the floor. You'll typically hear that as a 6-2 or a 5-1. And that is simply a serve into the net for an error on Meyer. (16-7), White Bear Lake still up by a bundle. Now 17-7 on the error by Gabriel. If you're wondering about that regular season meeting, it had the same undertones as this one appears to have. Otto scores. Specifically, White Bear Lake won the first set 25-22 and then 25-15, 25-19. So a few parallels. Line drive serve from Pearson. Although this third set has been a monstrous exhibition for the Bears. Talcott scoring for the Minutemen. Her third kill, but just not enough support or not enough consistency out of St. Paul Central's hitting game. That's Indra Kesaw, the libero for St. Paul Central. The long sleeve jersey. Don't see that often. Otto sent away. White Bear Lake keeps it in play. Sadaskar to Talcott. Now St. Paul Central has to go on the defensive. Talcott will score, even though the ricochet bounced off the backboard. Just about every high school team can tell you of the quirky gyms where the ball bounces around up there. There are a few where it's not an issue, but more often than not, you got to deal with the ceiling. In that case, White Bear Lake dealing with a deft blocking touch from Maya Link. That's the first block of any kind for the Bears, 19-9. They are coasting. Talcott gets that one through. And in almost any other instance, we probably would be talking about her presence in the third set. Unofficially 5 kills. The problem is White Bear Lake very much better on the attack, among other things. 9 aces for the game unofficially. St. Paul Central with 0. Meyer goes right to Otto. Meyer to Otto again. I think I called Otto a setter. That's Meyer's role right now, but Otto takes care of that point. And now Meyer will sub out for Zoe Niemioya, and Farmer comes in. What I said, again, White Bear Lake still runs that 5-1, but they do trade setters. There are some teams that have that option in their roster complement. Benilde St. Margaret's comes to mind, hitting error on Martina Caligari. Although in the case of Benilde St. Margaret's, who will have to get out of a tough section if they want to make it to state, but they've got a nifty setter, to say the least, in Sydney Friedley, with Ames Lieber serving as backup, giving the Red Knights a 2-pronged attack. White Bear Lake seems to be trending in that direction as well, at least midway through the season. Talcott with a hitting error, 21-11. Early in the year, it was mostly Meyer, and then Zoe came in a little later in the year. Caligari will serve for the Bears. Dillard couldn't get into a windup, but Pearl is able to, off the net and down. Pearl has been consistent. 12 kills unofficially, 4 in each set. It looks like this is going to be an early night for the White Bear Lake crew. Pearl Niemioya had to get after it, but somebody bumped into the net, so St. Paul Central will pick up the point. Of course, I'm staging for a possible runaway in this third set. Let's not forget St. Paul Central scored 7 in a row to make White Bear Lake wince just a bit. They had to take a timeout. They were up 24-15. Minutemen got within 2. Marino Rodriguez collecting the first ace of the game for St. Paul Central. It's possible the Minutemen could go on another run. Farmer with a little scoop. Talcott hits it out of play. Overall, probably what you thought would happen coming in. Not a straight set victory per se, but White Bear Lake, they've got a little more zip, a little more pep. Although Dillard had a little more finish. Hit the point for the Minutemen. Overall, I think composure and the difference in hitting stand out most. And when you can outpace your opponent 9-1 in service aces, that adds up too. Ogueli. Well, another run could be in the making. Pearl Niemioya came up soft on the tapper. That's Lana Hayden, who collects the ace. Is another run upon us. We get the Minutemen back into contention. 23-16. That's the problem, though, when you're down by a bunch this late in the set. Little room for error. The White Bear Lake has 8 points of breathing room. Pick up a straight set victory and move into a semifinal date with either Roseville or Irondale. Meyer to serve. St. Paul Central with the save after the ball got caught up in the ceiling. Otto. Get the finish yet. Talcott off speed. Gieske picks it up. Should be playable for the Bears. Instead, the Minutemen extend this game by another point. Olivia Smale not ready to go home just yet. White Bear Lake looking for their 10th straight set victory. That includes the weekend tournaments when it's best of 3. Otto. The teardrop. Talcott. Overpass. White Bear Lake saves it. Talcott again, blocked. St. Paul Central keeps it in play. Free ball for the Bears. Meyer to Otto for the finish. In this 3-6 matchup, you might say it's a 10 out of 10 for White Bear Lake as they earn their 10th straight set victory of the season. 25-15, 25-22, 25-17. As you look at the last play from Otto, Layla 3 kills in the 3rd set. Martina Caligari and Pearl Niemioya, the players of the game when you look at stats. But overall, the Bears, even though they stumbled a bit in the end of the 2nd set, had more of that poise, the composure, the stamina, the stability to carry them through into the section semifinals. They'll have a day of practice tomorrow, and then they will get ready for a section semifinal date. We take a look at the highlights. Martina Caligari, she was just about everywhere. Hit early and often in the 1st set. Unofficially, she will finish with 9 kills and 3 aces. Pearl Niemioya had a couple of miscues. Some attacks that came up soft, but she'll finish with 12 kills. Not a bad day for her. 2 big factors in White Bear Lake's victory. And as we said before, aces heavily in their favor. St. Paul Central got a couple in the 3rd set. But White Bear Lake had 9 as we make our way through these highlights. Farmer picking up a point, chipped in a few kills. Otto with an off-speed tapper, and saw some impressive defensive stances as well. You see there. on that play by Dillard, but White Bear Lake ran away with the third set. And here is a look at the game-winning point by Layla Otto to advance White Bear Lake into the section semis. Again, if you're watching this on SCC, stay tuned for updates on our social media channels and on our television stations to see what playoff games we'll be covering moving forward. And if you're watching this on NSPN.TV, I can let you know that we will be covering in some capacity the Section 4 4A semifinals, whether it's through a cable station or on our own accord. We'll have to wait and see. And then we'll have continuing coverage of the state soccer quarterfinals tomorrow and Thursday. Once again, we'd like to thank NSPN for their hospitality, giving us the opportunity to cover this Section 4 4A quarterfinal that belonged to White Bear Lake. St. Paul Central, their season comes to an end. White Bear Lake will play at least one more day in a straight set win here in the Section 4 4A quarterfinals. For the rest of the SCC crew, this is Mike Beaton thanking you for watching live coverage of high school girls volleyball. We'll see you next time.